Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, we're going to talk about the waste management approaches in this and also what type of waste is there. So, the word waste refers to any unwanted material or substance that results from human activity or process, something we don't want. And waste can degrade water quality, soil quality, air quality, human health. So, we need to make sure we process it properly. And there is several categories of waste. So something called municipal solid waste is a non-liquid waste that comes from homes, institutions, and small businesses. Industrial solid waste includes waste from production of consumer goods, mining, agriculture, petroleum extraction, refining, etc. And then we have hazardous waste that refers to solid or liquid waste that is toxic, chemically reactive, flammable, or corrosive. And that type is usually, if you wanted to think of an example, maybe a public health lab would have something like that. Wastewater, another one is wastewater, and that we use in our households or businesses or public facilities to drain or flush down our pipes. And so that's uh that's another category. So what are some of the techniques or components of waste management? One is to minimize the amount of waste we generate. So that's the main one. And then a second is recovering discarded material and recycling them. So trying to find a way to recycle them. And the third is disposing of waste safely and effectively. So we have several ways to reduce the amount of material in the waste stream. Waste stream is a flow of waste as it moves from the source towards the disposal destination. So minimizing the waste source is called source reduction, and it's the best way of dealing with waste stream. So this is the waste stream. And this is steps to reduce waste. So we can try to make the practices more efficient. We can minimize the packaging. This has increased a lot recently, the packaging, and that's been creating a lot of waste. We can purchase green consumer products, so something like maybe recyclable water bottles. We can reuse items, we can recycle items, we can make compost material at home for plants or gardening from organic waste, and then we can adopt municipal composting. So some approaches of waste management. Um, so the linear movement is pretty much basically moving from the manufacturer to their disposal is called as cradle to grave. So that's the name of it. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to move from cradle to cradle approach. So we're trying to do this approach instead of cradle to grave approach. So in this approach, cradle to cradle approach, materials from products are recovered and reused to make new products. And we can and that also includes recycling and composting. So recycling and composting is converting organic waste. So composting is converting organic waste to something called maybe mulch or humus through natural decomposition. So those are important parts and the natural cycling of materials. And you probably already know what recycling means. So these are considered recovery because they remove waste from the waste stream. Municipal solid waste is what we commonly call trash or garbage. And in the United States, paper, food scraps, yard trimmings, plastics are the principal components of municipal solid waste. And they together account for two-thirds of what enters the waste stream. So this is was showing you before recycling and composting the amounts, and this is after recycling and composting. So there are some differences in the numbers. So paper products make up the greatest portion of the weight here, so 25.9. But after recycling and composting, it removes many of that, so it goes down to 15.1. So the waste stream for that becomes one third smaller. So within the reduced waste stream, food scraps are the largest contributor. So these are food scraps. And this has gone up after um, recycling. So as we acquire more goods, we generate more waste. So in the States, the waste generation has tripled since 1960. So that's 1960s. Maybe it was around 60, and now it's around here, around 250. So that's a lot. Um, this is total waste, and this is per capita waste generation. So it has gone up. So this is kind of showing you some people, they depend on the waste and they try going picking up plastic bottles so they can sell those and make some money. So this is a result of excess packaging and non-durable goods. So packaging is the major source of waste that can be easily reduced. So we can start to buy unwrapped produce. We can buy food in bulk. Manufacturer can switch to packaging that is recyclable or reduce the size and weight of their containers. And people, some governments are there starting to tax and restrict the use of plastic shopping bags because they persist for so long and are often littered. So that's where the biggest waste was coming from. So reducing waste is our best option. This avoids cost of disposal and recycling helps us conserve resources, minimizes pollution. So this is one of the best options. So, maybe many of you drink from plastic bottles. You buy, you know, water bottles from maybe Costco, they sell them in bulk. So it's better to not buy the plastic bottles, but if you do, it's recommended to recycle them. This is a table given in your book to help reduce waste. I'll let you read through this on your own, but a couple things it's saying is we should donate to items of charity, reuse boxes, papers, plastic wraps, plastic containers, aluminum foil bags, wrapping paper, etc. So there are these things that you can do. Maybe when you go grocery shopping, take your own bag that's reusable, cloth bag or something like that. Um, when you're making photocopies, if you work in an office, try to do double-sided. Try to use electronic documents, which is very common now compared to before. Instead of printing out everything, maybe have your own like stainless steel coffee cup or something like that. So try to buy recyclable goods or try to do recycling as much as you can and go for less packaging. Try not using plastic bags as much. So read through the list and see what are some things that you can do. Something called composting. If you're into gardening, then you probably know about this. So that's the conversion of organic waste into mulch or humus through natural decomposition. And we can start to compost. And as the waste is added, heat from the microbial action builds the interior and decomposition proceeds. So something like banana peels, coffee grounds, grass clippings, leaves, so those things they can be composted. And the benefit of this, it enriches the soil, mimics the natural cycles of matter, prevents waste from reaching the landfill incinerator. So it's good for the environment and it's good for gardening and soil. So recycling also offers many benefits. It involves collecting used items, breaking them down, and the material can be reprocessed to manufacture new items. So there are three basic steps for the recycling loop. One is to collect and process the materials, and that's being done on many campuses now. Small towns and cities, they have locations where you can go recycle your bottles and you can receive some money for it. So you can maybe search up a recycling center. There is also curbside recycling where trucks pick up the recyclable items. So anyway, so first they collect the recycling items. And then those are taken to MRFs, materials recovery facilities, where workers and machines sort the items using automated processes like magnetic pulleys, optical sensors, water currents. And then they clean the material, they shred them, then they prepare them for reprocessing. So once it's ready, once it's sorted, um, then they can go ahead and use the recycled paper or glass or metal to make something new. So if the recycling is working fine, then the third step is purchasing, after they make the new material, purchasing the eco-labeled products made from the recycled material. So consumers do that. So buying recycling good consumers provide economic incentive for industry to recycle material and recycling facilities to open and expand. So I want to talk a little bit about China's new policy that um, affected all the recycling efforts. So what happened was in 2018, recycling programs across the world they were kind of thrown into disarray when China cut back on the imports of recycling materials, particularly plastics from other nations. So what happened for years? Most of the world's recycled material was processed in China because China was exporting ships full of trade goods and consumer products across the oceans. It was convenient and inexpensive for them to, for example, for the United States to load the empty ships after they took the goods out with discarded paper, plastic, scrap metal, and return the journey back to China. So labor costs were low in China, so it was working economically for them. And as China had a booming market of 1 billion people, many of them gained wealth and moved into middle class. That created a huge consumer base for products made from recycled material. But it was so easy to rely on mutually beneficial trade with China for recycling. Most of the nations, including the United States, failed to invest in building enough domestic infrastructure to process their own recyclables. But then in 2018, China said, we're not going to take your recyclables anymore, particularly plastics. They said the reason was that the material contained so much contamination. It had food residues, it had non-plasticable plastics, non-recyclable plastics mixed with the recyclable ones. So they had a lot of labor cost. They said it wasn't economically beneficial for them. They weren't making any money off of it. So they said they're not gonna do this anymore. And they were making their own recyclable waste, a lot of it at that point. So finally they said we're not gonna do it. They also didn't want to be seen as a dumping ground for dirty scrap. And then that kind of put all the nations in a disarray because they didn't have their own processing facilities to recycle. And then after that, they started efforts on basically how to recycle, to um, encourage recycling. They were given incentives. So they kind of had to come up with their own methods. So there's this one. It's a pay-as-you-throw garbage collection program. So it charges residents for home trash pickup according to the amount of trash that you put out. Less waste, then you have to pay less. More waste, you have to pay more. Bottle wells are the laws that consumers pay 5 to 10 cents deposit on recyclable containers. Sometimes you buy the plastic bottles, then you can take it back to the store where they give you some money for it. So states that do that, they have 2.5 times higher recycling than the states that don't do that. So this is kind of showing you if it's no deposit, this is how much recycling is happening. If it's 5 cent deposit, that's how much is happening. If it's more than 5 cents, there, 10 cents, even more. So where is our waste going? So sanitary landfills bury waste in the ground or pile it in large mounds, engineered to prevent waste from contaminating the environment. And then municipal landfills must adhere to standards that are set by EPA under this act that's called Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So in a sanitary landfill, waste is particularly decomposed by bacteria. It's compressed under its own weight. And then once that's done, once they put the waste inside the landfill, they put some layers on top of it. So soil is layered along with the waste to speed decomposition, reduce odor and infestation by pests. And then some infiltration of rainwater into landfill is good because it encourages biodegradable bacteria. But if it's too much, then that's not good. That's going to help the waste escape, um, or the contaminants can escape because the water can carry them out. So to protect against environmental contamination, landfill needs to be located away from wetlands and earthquake-prone faults and at least 6 meters above the water table. And then the bottoms and the sides of the landfill must be lined with heavy-duty plastic and clay to help prevent contaminations from seeping into aquifers. So the sanitary landfills, they have systems of pipes, collection ponds, and treatment facilities to collect. And then that prevents the leachate from escaping into the nearby groundwater. So to just make sure like our groundwater is not affected by this landfill, they try to cover it from all sides. So once the landfill is closed, it's capped with the engineering cover consisting of plastic, gravel, and soil. And then once it's closed, it can be used for other purposes. So here it's showing you landfill in operation, here after it's closed. All right, so just as sanitary landfills are improvement over open dumping, incineration is also another thing that we can do to um, burn the trash pretty much. So it's a combustion, it's a controlled process in which garbage is burned at very high temperatures. It reduces the weight of waste and volume, and it reduces the weight on the landfills, so we just don't have to depend on the landfills. But there are some downsides to it. The ash that remains after the trash is incinerated, it has toxic components that needs to be disposed in hazardous waste landfills. And also when the trash is burned, a lot of PCBs, heavy metals, are produced and released into atmosphere. So it's contributing to climate change. Um, some some nations they have banned incineration, but engineers they are trying to develop technology to reduce the emissions and see if they even can produce energy by burning the trash. So most incinerations are waste to energy facilities which use the heat produced by waste to combustion to boil water, creating steam that drives electricity generation. So they're trying to see if they can create some electricity. They are creating some electricity actually that fuels the heating system. So waste generates about 35% as much energy as burning coal. And inside the landfills, when the trash is getting decomposed by the bacteria, they also produce a gas that's called landfill gas. It's a mix of gases that's about 50% methane, and that can be collected, processed, and used as a source of energy. So a lot of people are starting to do that. And they're trying to sell it, make money off of it. All right, so we can also recycle materials from landfills. So steel, aluminum, copper, other metals are abundant enough in some landfills to make salvage operations profitable when the market prices for metals are high enough. And then organic waste from landfills could be mined and composted. Older landfill waste could also be incinerated in the um, waste to energy facilities.